The old woman grabbed her wrist and forced a ring onto her finger. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "never remove it." But that night, the ring started to move. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this one. And tell us from where you are listening our stories. Now let us go back to the beginning. By the time the sun lowered itself behind the raffia roofs of Umuoba village, Amina's legs were trembling from hunger. She had been on her feet since morning, carrying bundles of firewood to the market, only to return with almost nothing. A few coins sat in the corner of her wrapper, tied so tightly they pressed against her waist like a mockery. They were not enough for yam, not enough for oil, not enough even for salt. The road home was quiet, too quiet. Usually at that hour, women called children inside. Goats cried from courtyards, and the evening air carried the smell of pepper soup and wood smoke. But that evening, even the wind seemed to have stepped aside. Amina adjusted the bundle on her head and kept walking. Then she saw her. An old woman stood in the middle of the narrow red path ahead. Not by the roadside, not under a tree. In the middle, still, waiting. Amina slowed. The woman was wrapped in a faded black cloth that hung from her thin shoulders like a shadow. Her face was a map of deep lines and old suffering, but it was her eyes that made Amina's feet stop completely. They were sharp, alert, unblinking. They did not seem like the eyes of someone who had grown weak with age. They seemed like eyes that had watched many people fall. Amina swallowed. "Good evening, Mama," she said softly. The old woman did not answer. She lifted one hand, crooked one finger, and said, "Come here." The voice was dry and low, like a broom scraping over bare earth. Amina looked behind her. No one. She looked to the side. Empty compounds. No children playing. No chickens scratching. It was as if the whole village had stepped back and left her alone in that moment. "Mama," Amina said again. "Do you need help?" The woman's lips moved. I said, "Come here." Amina should have turned and run. Everything inside her told her to walk away, but poverty teaches strange obedience. When you have suffered long enough, you begin to respect every interruption, every unknown voice, every strange hand that calls you. It might be danger, but it might also be the thing that changes your life. So she stepped forward, one step then another, until she stood so close she could smell dried herbs and rain-soaked earth on the old woman's body. The woman looked at her hand. "Give it to me." Amina frowned. "Give you what?" "Your hand." Slowly, uncertainly, Amina held out her right hand. The woman seized it. Amina gasped. The grip was impossibly strong, not the weak clutch of an old person. This was the grip of someone who had buried her softness long ago. Before Amina could pull away, the woman slipped something cold and heavy onto her finger. A ring. Amina stared. It was not beautiful in the way rich women's rings were beautiful. It was not polished or delicate. It was thick, old, dark gold, with a dull red stone at the center that seemed to hold a sleeping light inside it. The stone was warmed. Amina tried to remove it. Immediately, it would not move. The old woman tightened her hold. "Listen to me," she said. Something in her tone made the evening feel darker. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, no matter who begs you never remove this ring." Amina's heart began to pound. "Mama, what is this? I cannot take. Never remove it." "Why?" The old woman leaned closer. Amina saw then that her left eye was clouded white. The other burned with terrible clarity. "Because of you, do," she whispered. "What has been waiting for you will finally see you." Amina's throat tightened. What does that mean? But the old woman released her hand suddenly. The ring sat on her finger, heavy as a promise. Amina stepped back. "Mama, please, take it back. I don't Want it?" The old woman smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who knew she had already left her mark. "You were chosen before you were born," she said. "The ring only remembers." Then she turned and began to walk into the trees beside the road. Amina blinked. By the time she took 2 hurried steps after her, the woman was gone. Gone! There was no place to disappear to, no bend in the path, no open gate, only low trees, roots, and shadow. But the woman was nowhere. Amina stood frozen. The ring burned faintly against her skin. By the time she reached home, night had already begun to gather. Her home was a tiny mud room at the back of her aunt's compound, barely large enough for a mat and a wooden stool. Since her parents had died, she had lived under her aunt's roof, like an unpaid servant. She fetched water, swept the yard, washed clothes, and still got reminded daily that she was an extra mouth in a house that was already struggling. Her aunt, Mama Fiamma, was waiting outside. "Where have you been?" she snapped. "Do you think firelights itself? Do you think people cook with darkness?" "I'm sorry, Auntie." The market, then Mama Fiamma saw the ring. Her eyes narrowed. "Where did you get that?" Amina hid her hand behind her wrapper instinctively. "It is nothing. Nothing." Her aunt stepped forward and seized her wrist. "You poor girls are always looking for ways to disgrace a household. Who gave you this?" "No one." The slap came so fast, Amina barely saw it. "Don't lie to me." Tears sprang to Amina's eyes. "An old woman on the road. She forced it on me." Mama Fiamma stared at the ring. Her face shifted, just for a second. Fear. Real fear. Then it disappeared. "Remove it." Amina tried. The ring would not budge. "It won't come off." Her aunt's jaw tightened. "Then rube oil." She told me never to remove it. Another slap, lighter this time but colder. "And since when do village beggars control you? Remove it before morning. I don't want evil in my compound." That night, Amina lay on her mat, staring at the roof. She rubbed palm oil over her finger. Nothing. She wrapped the ring in cloth and pulled. Nothing. She used soap. Nothing. At some point, exhausted, she gave up. The room was hot, but the skin around the ring felt cold. Outside, the village dogs began to bark, one after another. Then, all at once, the ring glowed. Not brightly, not like fire, just a low red pulse. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she heard it, not outside. Inside, the room. A whisper. Her name. She turned so quickly her neck hurt. No one. The room was empty. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Again the whisper came, thin as smoke. "Amina." This time it came from beneath the floor. She clutched her wrapper to her chest and backed against the wall. The ring grew warmer, then warmer still. And from beneath the earth of that tiny room came the sound of something scratching upward. Did not breathe. She could not. She sat pressed against the mud wall, knees tight against her chest, eyes fixed on the floor as the scratching sound continued beneath her mat. Slow, deliberate, as if fingers were dragging themselves through packed earth. Her lips trembled. "Auntie." She tried to call, but her voice came out as barely more than air. The ring on her finger pulsed, red again. The scratching stopped. Silence crashed over the room so suddenly it felt louder than the noise had been. Amina listened, every muscle frozen, waiting for it to begin again. Nothing. Then, from the corner near the stool, came a soft knock. 1, 2, 3. Amina turned sharply. No! One was there. Another knock. This time from the door. She stared at it, chest heaving. The wooden door trembled slightly in its frame, not from wind, but from 3 slow taps from the outside. A woman's voice called. It was her mother's voice. Amina's entire body jerked. No, 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 that was impossible. Her mother had been dead for 7 years, buried with white cloth and bitter tears after fever swept through the village. Amina herself had watched them lower her into the ground. "Amina," the voice said again, tender and familiar, "open the door, my child." Tears rushed to her eyes before she could stop them. For one dangerous second, grief moved her more strongly than fear. She rose from the mat. The ring suddenly became unbearably hot. Amina cried out and looked down. The red stone glowed so sharply it lit her fingers. Then she remembered the old woman's words. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear." Amina stumbled backward. The voice outside changed at once. The sweetness vanished. "What are you waiting for?" it hissed. "Open this door." The knock became pounding. The wood shook. Dust fell from the frame. It was no longer her mother's voice. It was deeper now, hungry, furious. "You cannot hide from what belongs to you," Amina screamed. Across the compound, her aunt's footsteps pounded over hard earth. A lantern light flashed through the cracks in the door. "What is this noise?" "Mama," Ifema shouted, "Dot!" The pounding stopped instantly. The silence that followed was so sudden, so complete, that even the crickets outside seemed confused. Her aunt pushed the door open and entered. "Lantern in? And what are you screaming for?" she snapped. "Do you want to wake the whole village?" Amina rushed to her. Someone was outside. Someone was calling me. "There is no one here." She used my mother's voice. Her aunt's face hardened. But there was something else there too. Something old. Something she was trying hard not to show. "Enough," she said. "Auntie," I heard scratching under the floor. "Enough." The shout cut the room in two. Mama Ifema lifted the lantern and saw the ring glowing faintly. The color drained from her face. She set the lantern down very slowly. "When exactly did she give it to you?" Amina swallowed. "At sunset, near the Udala tree by the narrow road." Her aunt closed her eyes, just briefly, as if a memory had struck her between the ribs. Then she turned away. "You will not sleep here tonight," she said. "What? You will sleep in my room." Amina stared. Her aunt had never invited her into her room. Never. Even as a child after her parents died, Amina had slept alone. "Auntie, why?" Instead of answering, Mama Ifema bent, lifted the mat, and stared at the bare earth beneath. There were 3 long marks in the floor. Fresh, like something sharp had dragged itself upward and almost reached the surface. Her aunt covered them quickly and stood. "Come." She carried the lantern and led Amina across the yard to her own room. Once inside, she bolted the door, placed a small wooden crucifix near the window, and threw a handful of white chalk in a line across the threshold. Amina watched in confusion. "You knew," she whispered. Mama Ifema did not answer. "You knew something like this would happen." Still silence. Then the older woman sat slowly on the edge of her bed. For the first time in Amina's life, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. "When your mother was alive," she said at last, "there were things she never told you, things she thought she had buried." Amina's heart hammered. "What things?" Her aunt looked up. "Your mother was not the one who was chosen. It was me." The words landed heavily. "What?" "I was the beautiful one." "Mama," Ifema said bitterly, "the proud one. Men noticed me. Women envied me. I thought life would bow to me, because my face was smooth and my waist was small." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "One dry season, when I was still a girl, I met an old woman on that same road. She gave me the same ring." Amina instinctively covered her hand. I laughed at her, Mama Ifeoma continued. I told I was not foolish enough to wear a stranger's gift, but she forced it on me and warned me exactly as she warned you. What happened? I removed it. The lantern flame crackled softly. Amina leaned forward. Her aunt's voice dropped. That night, my fiancé died. Amina stared. He was found behind his father's barn with his neck twisted, and his eyes open so wide the white showed all around. No wound, no thief, no explanation, just fear frozen on his face. A chill moved through Amina's arms. The next week, Mama Ifeoma said, my father fell into the well. My mother lost her mind. Everywhere I went, shadows moved, where no one stood. Things whispered my name after dark. Children cried when I came near. They said I carried bad luck. She looked at Amina's finger. They said something had seen me. Amina's mouth went dry. What stopped it? Nothing stopped it. It only moved away. To where? Mama Ifeoma's eyes met hers. To your mother? Amina recoiled as if struck. No. Yes. She never told me. Because she loved you. Because she thought silence would save you. She married quickly, hoping marriage would seal the door. When you were born healthy, she believed the curse had ended. Amina shook her head desperately. No. 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 This cannot be true. Your mother died young for a reason. The room felt smaller. No. Amina could not let that thought in. She would break if she let that thought in. She had fever, Amina whispered. That's what everyone said. People say many things when the truth is too ugly. A long silence followed. Then Amina asked the question that frightened her most. Why me now? Mama Ifeoma looked toward the window where darkness had thickened outside. Because some things wait until the bloodline ripens, Amina gripped. The bedspread. So what do I do? Her aunt exhaled slowly. In the morning, we go to Nwani in Kem. The diviner. Yes. I thought you hated her. I do, but hate and need are not the same. Outside, something brushed softly against the wall. Both women fell silent. The sound moved from one side of the room to the other. Not footsteps, not claws, something smoother, like wet cloth. Being dragged across mud, ring pulsed again. Then came a whisper at the window. Not her mother's voice this. Time. Not human. Low, rustling. Almost amused. Morning will not save her. Mama! Ifeoma reached for the lantern with shaking hands. And just before dawn, while neither of them slept, they heard laughter from the roof. The first light of morning did not bring peace. It only made the fear visible. Amina's eyes burned from lack of sleep as she followed her aunt down the narrow bush path leading out of Umuoba. The village looked ordinary again in daylight. Women swept compounds. Men argued over palm wine. Smoke rose from cooking fires. But to Amina, everything felt false, as though normal life were just a thin mat laid over a pit. No one knew what had stood outside that door. Or perhaps, she thought, some people knew and had chosen silence. Nigerian Kem lived beyond the cassava. Fields near the old Iroko tree people avoided after sunset. Her hut was small but surrounded by charms. Strings of cowries, feathers, white chalk symbols, and clay pots turned upside down on wooden stakes. Mama Ifeoma did not call out before entering the compound. She simply stopped at the gate. Amina understood. Why, a moment later? A voice came from inside the hut. You should have brought her sooner. Amina's stomach turned. The diviner stepped out. Nigerian Kem was not old in the weak, bent sense of age. She was lean, straight-backed, and powerful. Her eyes were ringed with white chalk. Around her neck hung leather amulets and beads made from bone. She looked first at Amina's finger, then at Mama Ifeoma, then back at Amina. So, she said quietly. "It has chosen the child after all." Amina's aunt brisked, "Do not speak in riddles." The diviner ignored her. "Come inside." The hut smelled of herbs, oil, and something bitter burning in a clay dish. The walls were lined with gourds, carved figures, and bundles of dried leaves hanging upside down from the rafters. A woven mat lay in the center of the room. "Sit," Nwanyi said. Amina sat. The diviner knelt before her and took her hand. The moment her fingers touched the ring, she hissed and pulled back. "It is awake." Amina's throat tightened. "What is it?" The diviner lifted her gaze. "A debt." Mama Ifeoma folded her arms. "Speak clearly." Nwanyi's expression darkened. "Your grandmother made a bargain." The room fell still. Amina blinked. "My grandmother? Yes. Before you were born, before your mother was married, there was famine that year. Crops failed. Children were dying. Your grandmother had 3 daughters and nothing left to feed them." Mama Ifeoma stared at the floor. "She went into the forest," Nwanyi said, "and called for help from a power older than the shrines of men. Something answered. It offered protection, wealth, and survival in exchange for one promise." Amina's skin prickled. "What promise?" "The first daughter of the bloodline, who carried both beauty and stubbornness, would belong to it." Amina felt the blood drain from her face. "No." Your grandmother agreed. Mama Ifeoma spoke through clenched teeth. She was desperate. Nwanyi turned sharply. Desperation does not wash a mouth clean after it speaks to darkness. Amina stared at both women. "You knew." "I suspected," Mama Ifeoma said quietly, "but I never knew the full bargain." The diviner continued. "Your grandmother prospered after that. Her daughters survived. The house expanded. Hunger left. Men began asking for their hands. But bargains like that do not disappear. They wait. Your mother was meant to carry it, but love interrupted the path for a while. Then death came. Now the promise has circled back to you." Amina's eyes filled. "All this because of something done before I was born." Nwanyi's face softened only slightly. "That is how old sins work. They eat from the plates of children." Amina looked at the ring with horror. "How do you remove it? You do not remove it casually. If you force it off, the thing that marked you will come openly. Not in whispers. Not in dreams. Openly." Mama Ifeoma stepped forward. "Then how do we end this?" The diviner rose and moved toward a small wooden box in the corner. She opened it and took out a cloth bundle. Inside were old cowries, a rusted key, and a tiny carved figure of a woman kneeling. "There is only one path," she said. "What path?" Amina asked. "You must return the debt." "How?" "The power that claimed your bloodline feeds on secrecy, fear, and broken promises. It must be called into truth, exposed, named, refused before witnesses." Mama Ifeoma frowned. That sounds like madness." "It sounds like justice," the diviner said sharply. "And justice is always expensive." She handed Amina the rusted key. "This opens a chest buried under the floor of your late grandmother's room." Amina's fingers trembled around it. "In that chest," Nwanyi said, "is the contract of the bargain, the tokens used to seal it. If you bring them to the shrine by the dry river before the next full moon, there may still be a way to break the inheritance." "May Mama!" Ifeoma snapped. The diviner's eyes flashed. "Did you want guarantees after feeding generations to silence?" Amina looked down. "What if it stops me?" "It will try." "How?" Nwanyi's answer came without hesitation. "It will wear familiar faces. It will stir greed in people. Around you, it will tempt you with relief. It will offer you the one thing you think you cannot live without, Amina whispered. And if I fail, the diviner held her gaze. Then by the next moon, you will no longer know your own name. The words lodged inside Amina like thorns. Outside the hut, a sudden gust of wind struck the hanging charms. So hard they clattered together. Nigerian turned toward the door. It knows you are here. Before Amina could speak, the diviner dipped her fingers into white chalk and drew symbols across Amina's forehead, chest, and both palms. Do not wash these off, say? Do not travel alone after sunset. And whatever you see in your grandmother's room, do not believe the first thing it shows you. Amina rose on weak legs. As she and her aunt stepped outside, a man was standing at the edge of the compound. Tall, well-dressed. Too well-dressed for that path. His wrapper was clean, his sandals expensive, and his walking stick polished dark as oil. He was perhaps in his early 40s, with a calm, handsome face and the easy confidence of someone used to being respected. He smiled when he saw Amina. "Forgive the interruption," he said. "I came looking for Mama Ifeoma, a matter of land near the eastern boundary." Mama Ifeoma stiffened. Chief Edwin. Amina glanced at her aunt in surprise. Edwin was one of the wealthiest men in the district, a widower, influential, feared by some, admired by many. He did not come personally to village huts. His eyes rested briefly on Amina's hand. Only briefly, but she saw it. Recognition. Something like satisfaction flickered in his gaze and vanished. Nigerian stepped between them. "You should leave," she told him flatly. Chief Edwin smiled. "Have I offended? You arrived too quickly." His smile widened, but his eyes did not. "I did not know visitors required permission." Amina felt the ring grow warm. Not burning, responding. The chief noticed her flinch. "Are you unwell, my child?" he asked kindly. Something in the kindness made her cold. Mama Ifeoma took her arm. "We are leaving." As they turned away, Chief Edwin spoke again. "To think," he said casually, "some inherit more than land from their ancestors." Amina stopped. Her aunt gripped her tighter. "Keep walking." They walked faster down the path. Only when they reached the cassava fields did Amina dare ask, what did he mean? Mama Ifeoma did not answer at once. Tensa sighed. "Your grandmother did not go into that forest alone." Amina stared. Chief Edwin's father went with her. The world seemed to tilt. "He is part of this. I don't know how much. But now I know enough to fear him." Amina looked back over the field. In the distance, just visible between the trees, Chief Edwin still stood outside the diviner's hut, watching them go, and for the first time, Amina understood something with absolute certainty. The ring had not found her by accident. Someone had been waiting for it to return. By evening, the compound of Amina's late grandmother felt less like a family home and more like a grave that had learned how to stand upright. No one had slept in the old woman's room since her death. The door remained shut most days, opened only when Mama Ifeoma needed to store yams or search for some forgotten wrapper. Even then, she never lingered. Now, as the sun sank and shadows stretched long across the yard, Amina stood before that door with a rusted key in one hand and a lantern in the other. Mama Ifeoma stood behind her. "We should wait until morning." Ironside had said the opposite. "Do not delay. What darkness seals, daylight often hides." Amina took a breath and pushed the door open. The smell hit first: dust, old cloth, stale camphor, and the faint sweetness of decay. The room was small, but orderly, as though the dead woman might return at any moment to complain that things had been moved. A wooden bed, a stool, locked chest in one corner, a prayer cloth hanging crooked on the wall, and beneath it all, the sensation thick and immediate that the room was aware of them. Amina stepped inside. The ring pulsed. The lantern flame shook though there was no wind. Mama Fioma followed reluctantly and shut the door halfway. "Where exactly under the floor?" she whispered. Amina looked around. The packed mud floor seemed ordinary, but the ring grew warmer as she moved toward the bed. There, they shoved the bed aside. Near the center of the room, the surface of the floor was slightly darker, smoother, as if it had been resealed by hand years ago. Mama Ifiema fetched a hoe. With each strike into the floor, the room seemed to recoil. Dust rose. The lantern flickered. By the third strike, Amina heard it again, that whispering sound from 2 nights before, but this time it came from the walls. Words she could not quite understand. On the 5th strike, the hoe hit wood. Both women froze. Together, they away the packed dirt until the outline of a small buried chest appeared. Iron corners, rotting wood, a rusted lock. Amina knelt, hands shaking, and slid the key into the lock. It resisted, then turned. The lid opened with a groan that sounded too much like a human breath. Inside lay 3 objects: a strip of old cloth stained brown, with a leather pouch tied with red thread, and a folded document sealed in wax so dark it looked black. Amina reached for the paper. The moment her fingers touched it, the room changed. The lantern went out. Darkness swallowed everything. "Mama!" Ifiema screamed. Amina spun around, but the room was gone. She was standing in a forest. Moonlight spilled between trees she did not recognize. The air smelled of wet leaves and fear. Ahead of her stood a younger version of her grandmother, beautiful, desperate, thinner than Amina had ever known her arguing with a man. Chief Edwin's father. Amina recognized him from old stories and framed pictures. "You said no blood," the younger woman hissed. The man snapped back. "No blood now, only a promise later. We need rain, and we need food. This is wrong. This is survival." The forest darkened. Something moved behind them. Not walking, gathering like smoke, deciding to take shape. Amina could not see it clearly. Onlite. Outline of too many limbs, and a face that never fully arrived. The younger grandmother fell to her knees. "What do you want?" she whispered. A voice answered from everywhere. The future. Amina tried to move, tried to scream, but her body would not obey. She watched as her grandmother pressed her thumb into a blade, drew blood, and marked the folded contract. Chief Edwin's father did the same. The smoke shape bent over them like a satisfied god. "The beautiful one first," it said. "Then the hidden one, then the child who refuses." The scene shattered. Amina gasped and found herself back in the room, sprawled on the floor, the document clutched against her chest. The lantern had relit itself. Mama Ifioma was shaking her shoulders. "Amina! Amina!" Amina sucked in air. "I saw them!" Her aunt stepped back, face pale. "Saw who?" "Grandmother. Edwin's father. In T4. They made the bargain together." The room fell silent. Then a slow clap came from the doorway. Both women turned. Chief Edwin stood there, smiling. Behind him were 2 men from the village, broad-shouldered and expressionless. Mama Ifiema rose immediately. "Who told you to enter this house?" Chief Edwin's voice was smooth. "When old things wake, they become everyone's concern." Amina stood, gripping the document. His gaze dropped to it. "Ah," he said softly. "So you found it. Stay back," Mama Ifiema warned. Chief Edwin stepped fully into the room. "You do not understand what you are carrying." "Child," he said to Amina, "some inheritances are too heavy for one person. Give it to me." "No." His smile thinned. "I can help you." Amina's fear sharpened into anger. "The same way your father helped my grandmother." Something flashed in his eyes. So it was true. The chief sighed. Then you have seen enough to become troublesome. Mama Ifeoma moved in front of Amina. Leave, but Chief Edwin no longer bothered pretending gentleness. My father was wiser than the villagers who mocked him, he said coldly. He knew power does not come to the timid. That bargain built half the prosperity this district enjoys. Roads, harvests, landholdings, influence. All of it from one bold decision. Amina stared at him in disgust. And what did it cost? She asked. He looked at her finger. One girl each generation, a small price compared to what men waste for vanity. Mama Ifeoma lunged for the hoe. One of the men behind Edwin seized her arms and slammed her against the wall. Auntie, Chief! Edwin stepped toward Amina. Give me the contract. The next full moon is close. Once the ritual is complete, your suffering will end. Amina backed away. You mean my life will end? He smiled faintly. Life, child, is a flexible word. The ring began to burn. Not with fear this time. With fury. Chief Edwin saw it, and stopped for the first time. Uncertainty crossed his face. Amina looked at the document in her hand, then at the leather pouch and stained cloth still in the chest. Nguyen Nenkem's words thundered back into her mind. It must be called into truth. Exposed, named. Refused before witnesses. She made her choice in a heartbeat. Snatching the pouch and cloth with her free hand, she shoved past the bed, darted toward the back window, and hurled herself through it. The glassless opening tore her wrapper and scraped her arm, but she landed hard outside and ran. Behind her came shouts, men's feet. Mama Ifeoma, screaming her name. Chief Edwin roaring, don't let her reach the river. Amina ran through the night with a contract against her chest, the ring blazing like an ember, and one terrible understanding growing clearer with every breath. This was no longer about surviving a curse. It was about exposing the men who have fed generations of women to it, and if she failed, she would not be the last. The dry river shrine lay beyond the village boundary, where even hunters lowered their voices. By the time Amina reached it, her lungs were on fire, and her legs felt hollow. Branches had whipped her skin raw. Her wrapper was torn. Blood ran down one shin where she had stumbled over a hidden root. Still, she ran. Behind her, voices chased through the dark. Chief Edwin's men. Maybe Edwin himself. Maybe something worse. The shrine appeared suddenly between two giant silk cotton trees, a circle of old stones, a cracked altar, and a basin carved into the earth where water had not flowed in years. Moonlight washed the place in silver. Wany Ningkem was already there. Amina nearly collapsed with relief. You knew I would come. The diviner took one look at her and answered, No, I only feared what would happen if you didn't. Amina thrust the contract, cloth, and pouch toward her. He came. Chief Edwin. He admitted everything. Nguyen Nkem's eyes flashed. Good. Truth spoken aloud is easier to chain. She took the items and spread them on the altar. Listen carefully, she said. Once we begin, it will fight with everything it has. It will use fear, memory, desire. If you agree to anything it offers even in your heart, the debt remains. Amina nodded, though terror was clawing its way back into her stomach. What do I do? When I call the names of the dead, you must speak yours. Mine? Yes. Yes, fully, without shame. That is how you refuse inheritance, by standing where others knelt. Footsteps thundered from the trees. Chief Edwin burst into the clearing with his men. But he was not alone. Mama Ifeoma stumbled behind them, wrists bound with rope. Amina cried out. Edwin lifted a hand and his men forced the older woman to her knees. Should have stayed hidden. A-sighed coldly. Now everyone loses. Nguyen Nkam stood straighter. Release her, Edwin laughed. "You speak as though you hold power here." The diviner began scattering white powder around the altar. I held enough. The wind changed. It came hard and sudden, circling the shrine, lifting dust and dead leaves into a spinning ring around them. The temperature dropped so sharply Amina shivered. Chief Edwin's confidence flickered tenterin. Amina's finger burned, white-hot. The red stone split with light. Something rose from the basin. At first it looked like smoke, then flesh, then shadow, wearing flesh badly. A shape tall, too thin, too wrong, limbs bending where they should not bend, a face that shifted from one familiar image to another, her mother, her grandmother, a crying child, an old man never, settling long enough to be trusted. The men behind Edwin began to back away. One dropped his machete. The thing's voice came from everywhere. At once, the promise ripens. Amina's knees nearly buckled. Nuanya Nkem shouted, "Stand!" Amina forced herself upright. Chief Edwin took a step forward, trying to master his fear. "I have upheld the bargain," he said. "My father upheld it before me. We fed you. We protected your claim." The thing turned toward him. For one moment, it wore his father's face, then smiled. "And what did you feed me from your own house, Edwin?" The chief froze. Amina stared. The spirit leaned closer. "Not daughters, not sons, only borrowed girls. You profited from another family's wound and called it devotion." The clearing went dead silent. Even Edwin's men looked at him in shock, so he had hidden behind Amina's bloodline all these years. Taking the wealth, escaping the cost. Nuenya Nkem seized the moment. She broke the wax seal on the contract and began to read aloud in a language older than the village. The wind roared. The spirit shrieked. Chief Edwin lunged toward the altar. "Es! Top! Hair!" His men did not move. Fear had broken their loyalty. Edwin ran at the diviner himself, but Amina stepped into his path. He slapped her hard. The world flashed white. Still, she did not fall. He reached for the contract. Amina drove both hands into his chest and screamed with everything inside her, "No more." The ring exploded with light. Chief Edwin flew backward, as though struck by lightning, and crashed into the stone basin. The spirit screamed again, but now the scream was changing. Not anger. Weakness. Nwany. Nkem lifted the stained cloth. Blood of bargain. Bargain. She threw it into a clay firepot. The cloth ignited instantly. The spirit convulsed. She untied the leather pouch and poured out its contents: cowries, animal teeth, and a tiny lock of human hair. Witness of binding, she cast them into the fire. The flames rose blue. The spirit folded in on itself, shrinking, twisting. Nwany. Names of the chained. She called Amina's grandmother's name, then her mother's, then Mama Ifiama's. The ring on Amina's finger throbbed like a second heartbeat. Nuanya Nkem turned to her and roared, "Now yours." Amina looked at the thing, at Chief Edwin struggling in the dust, at her aunt kneeling with tears streaming down her face, at the generations of women who had suffered because silence had been easier than truth. Then she lifted her head. "Name is Amina Nwasu," she said, voice shaking but clear. "I am not a debt. I am not an offering. I do not belong to fear. I refuse this inheritance before the living and the dead." The air split. The ring cracked. The spirit lunged at her with a sound like 100 whispers screaming at once, and hit an invisible wall. Light burst from the broken stone. Not red now, gold, bright. Clean, merciless. The ring shattered off a finger. Spirit let out one final shriek and collapsed inward, shrinking into a dark knot, no larger than a fist, before bursting into ash that scattered over the basin. Then silence. Real silence, not heavy and holy. Amina stared at her bare hand. The ring was gone. Chief Edwin, however, was not saved by that silence. He tried to rise, could not. His face had aged in seconds. His skin sagged. His hair grayed before their eyes. He looked not like a chief, but like a man from whom borrowed years had just been collected. "No," he whispered. Noeni Enkem looked down at him without pity. Power always keeps its receipt. The villagers began arriving then, drawn by the screams and wind and unnatural light. Men, women, elders, faces full of alarm. They found Chief Edwin in the dirt, begging dat. They found Mama Afima bound. They found Amina standing before the shattered altar with the opened contract in her hand. And before that crowd, with moonlight exposing every lie, Amina told the story. She told them of the bargain, of the dead women, of the ring, of the way. Edwin's family had taken prosperity, while hers carried the curse. No one interrupted, no one defended him. When she finished, an elder stepped forward and looked at the ruined chief. "Is it true?" Chief Edwin said nothing. He could not. Truth had already answered for him. By dawn, his lands were seized, his household emptied, his titles stripped before the same people who once bowed when he passed. He was not killed. In stories like these, death is often too easy. Instead, he lived long enough to watch respect leave him one face at a time. As for Mama Ifeoma, something in her loosened after that night. She did not become soft overnight. Some lives harden a person too deeply for that. But she stopped speaking to Amina like a burden and began speaking to her like blood. And Amina, the village changed the way. Saw her, not because fear clung to her, but because it didn't. She became known as the girl who stood where others had bowed, the girl who exposed what old men had hidden, the girl who refused to be inherited. Months later, when the rains returned and green rose from the soil again, Amina walked once more along the red road where she had first met the old woman. This time the evening breeze was gentle. The path was alive with ordinary sounds again. Near the udala tree, she paused. There, on the ground, lay a single cowrie shell. Nothing more. No figure, no voice, no ring. Amina smiled faintly, picked up the shell, and slipped it into her wrapper. Then she walked home not as a chosen victim, not as a marked child of old bargains, but as the first daughter in generations to carry her family name without fear. And in Umuoba village, people would later say this whenever mothers warned daughters against silence, and daughters asked why truth mattered so much. Because one night, a poor girl wore a cursed ring and taught darkness what it means to be refused. Thank you for sitting with us through this story. Friends, thank you for following Amara all the way to the end. If her journey moved something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or the strength of someone you love, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you never miss a story. Every story we tell is a fire, and we need you there to keep it burning. Watch our next story right here. It is waiting for you.